Hey everybody, happy World Asthma Day. I wanted to hop on because World Asthma Day, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it is because there is a humongous correlation between asthma and chronic illnesses such as autoimmune disease. And autoimmune diseases obviously have a correlation with neurological disorders. And we also experience a lot of shortness of breath or tightening of the lungs and other things that are very similar to asthma in this world of autoimmune and neurological disorders. And especially it's one of the leading symptoms when you have something such as mold illness or SIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And we find it a lot also in dysautonomia and multiple sclerosis. So the reason why I want to talk about asthma and shortness of breath specifically is because this is something myself I experienced when I was at my sickest point. I remember feeling like I just couldn't breathe, and I had a history. Asthma runs in my family. I have a congenital disease that has a high incidence of asthma. And when I used to always feel like I couldn't breathe when I would exercise, just growing up in general. So there's a possible undiagnosed exercise-induced asthma that I was already experiencing. And then when I got sick, I was feeling obviously inflamed, but it would feel like somebody was squeezing my bronchioles inside my lung, especially during one of my seizures. During a seizure-like episode, it would feel like those muscles surrounding my bronchioles were like imploding upon themselves and cutting off my breathing. My episodes would cut off my breathing, and I would be gasping for air, and it'd sound really asthmatic. And we also, one of the things that we thought during the time was that I had possible multiple sclerosis, and one of the symptoms that I was having that was supporting that theory at the time was having the feeling like somebody was squeezing my chest, which they refer to as like the MS hug. I now know that that was just shortness of breath. And even though I wasn't having classic asthma, it was very much related, as in there was inflammation in my bronchioles, cutting off my airways. And so what I think is really interesting about that is that at that point in my journey, I knew that I had a ton of food sensitivities. And for me, it was not really something that I wanted to explore to use an inhaler or other things. Number one, I didn't want the endocrine disruption of the steroids. And number two, every time I looked up the ingredients of inhalers, they contain ingredients that would trigger some of my autoimmune and neurological disease and cause more damage. So even if I did choose to go to that, it was something that I wanted to minimize. Now, I am not at any point giving any medical advice. I'm not speaking to any individual. I am not recommending that you do not take your medications or get off your medications. What I do recommend anybody doing this, have as many tools in their arsenal as possible, and utilize those in a way, and work with your healthcare provider to utilize those in a way that helps you reach your goals and to maximize your health. And for me, that means that using more natural root cause based therapies and minimizing medications. And even when I am on a medication, I'm almost 99% of the time looking for an exit plan. How am I going to get off this medication? What is my baby steps from where I am to no longer needing this medication? How can I heal? So that's how I personally choose to go through this. But today I want to go over some natural therapies for asthma and shortness of breath. And one of my biggest resources is working under a chiropractor named Dr. Chris Harrison in Birmingham, Alabama. He is a gentleman that has been doing chiropractic for a very, very, very long time, and he wrote a book. I'm going to show it to you right here. It's called How to Prevent Allergy and Asthma Attacks. Unfortunately, it's a book that is not widely available. I'm lucky that I've had to get a second copy of it because the first one was contaminated by mold. But through this, I was able to learn a couple techniques and a couple supplements that could really help me. And then I also found some on my own. And what was interesting is they actually ended up helping me in multiple ways outside of breathing. So I started them because I was having shortness of breath, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to try these things, see if they can help. And then not only did they help, but they also started helping in other areas as well, which was very helpful to my recovery. So I actually am kind of loving this book. It's very, very easy to read. In fact, I remember thinking when I read this that it was so well written and that I really liked the format of it, and that the way that his approach was just as more as a health, like as a health reporter. And I remember really appreciating that right there. So there's a couple things that I want to cover. I'm not going to like read the book to you or anything, but I do want to kind of cover some of the things that stand out. So I'm going to open this just to use it as a prompt for me, just so that I don't forget what I want to talk about. The first thing I want to talk about is nutrition, of course. One of the biggest heavy hitters for me was magnesium. So magnesium is something that most people are deficient in, and it's not a deficiency that would show up on a blood test. In fact, our body will pull magnesium from the rest of our body to maintain the pH of our blood, and it'll pull it out of our bones, etc., to maintain the pH of our blood. So it's not really a good place to get a blood test to test your magnesium level. If your blood is low on magnesium, you are really seriously low. Like you were low years ago and it's just now showing up in this area. And so that can be a problem. Some of the things that can cause a magnesium deficiency is we're taught not to salt our foods, and not having enough sodium in the body to help maintain the blood pH will cause it to pull it. So we'll pull magnesium from our bones into our blood, especially if there's not enough salt there to begin with. So that's just one thing that can happen. Other things that can cause a higher need for magnesium is stress, so mental, emotional stress, and also physical stress. So an injury, something like that, broken bone, cut, scrape, whatever, but also having autoimmune disease, having neurological disorder, any type of dis-ease or disease causes stress to the body. And so anytime your body has more to do or is experiencing imbalance, it's going to increase the need for magnesium. If you have adrenal fatigue, your magnesium is increased, a need for it is increased in order to heal, because you're not only need it for them to run properly, but also for them to repair themselves. So those are other good signs. Other signs that you might need some more magnesium would be if you're having headaches, bodily pains such as fibromyalgia, aches and pains of any other type, slow healing, constipation, anxiety, and those are just a couple ones that I can think of right off the bat. So definitely magnesium is low in many people, but especially I see very high need for magnesium in my client population. And what's also interesting about this is that there is no optimal daily allowance or upper limit for magnesium. It's very bio-individual. So like I think the regular recommendations, someone take 200, whereas those who are chronically ill could need, 0, they can need 100, they can need 1200 a day. The highest that I think I've ever seen somebody take in addition to eating to what they're getting from their food was 1200 milligrams in additional magnesium, in addition to a very well nutrient dense, the heavy vegetable diet. And that just really depends on the individual's health. So working with your a knowledgeable health practitioner or nutritionist can help you find your optimal daily allowance. And there are some techniques to do that and to really fine tune that so that you understand what your body needs. And that will change over time as well. So as you heal, you'll likely need less to maintain homeostasis, reduce pain, anxiety, increase sleep quality, etc. But it is very common to have low anyway, even in perfectly healthy people. Just simply getting at least 200 milligrams a day can really improve a lot of things, even from bowel movements to sleep to just general happiness and well-being. It can also have a impact on depression as well as anxiety. So definitely getting enough magnesium. I have experienced this within the context of my shortness of breath. I know that when I was having shortness of breath, I would take my magnesium and I would actually feel my bronchioles kind of dilate, because magnesium is an anti-inflammatory, and that constriction is inflammation. So you can actually use magnesium as an anti-inflammatory. And then also using other anti-inflammatory herbs and stuff like that. There's ones targeted specifically at the lungs, such as zinc is a nutrient that's used in lung diseases such as like pneumonia. But then there's also some herbal bronchial dilators that can be used that are going to work very differently than, say, steroids. Steroids are endocrine disruptors because they are hormones. And so when you add hormones into an already balanced hormone system, or even an imbalanced one, it can cause further imbalance. So obviously steroids are not an ideal long-term solution. Now, of course, you do whatever you need to do to breathe because it's kind of important. But if there is alternatives that work for you, then that's really something that I do recommend to discussing with your doctor. So another technique that I learned was a breath technique. And I've had asthmatics try this. They've had good things happen. Of course, we always, use your inhaler whenever you need to breathe. But for example, let's say you are somewhere and it's not bad enough to use an inhaler, or you just can't get to it for a few seconds, or you need to delay it. One of the techniques that you can try is there's a way of breathing to cause dilation of your bronchioles. So what you do is you exhale completely, and then you hold your breath, and you want to hold your breath until you feel that need to gasp for air. Right at the time that you feel like, oh my God, I've got to breathe, your lungs will actually dilate to receive more oxygen. And so I've tried this on my own, and I've had some other asthmatics also try it, where they would exhale completely, hold their breath until they needed to gasp for air. It would automatically dilate. And then I've actually had some not need to use their inhaler or restore that ability to breathe for the day. And so that can be an extra tool to help reduce the amount. Now, of course, I would never replace this with medical help. It's just a tool in your arsenal, of course. So let's see what else that is recommended. I never did open it up because I was too busy talking about everything. Other things that you can do is hydrate. So definitely hydration reduces inflammation. So you want to remember that asthma is an inflammatory disease. So anything that you can do to reduce inflammation is going to be good. Eating an anti-inflammatory diet, reducing food sensitivities. Certain food sensitivities can increase inflammation and trigger shortness of breath. Certain environmental sensitivities, that's why we see it so much in mold illness, is because mold can cause the neurological response of shortness of breath. So definitely that can be a neurological response. So you always want to be looking for root causes in the meantime. Hydrating is one of those things that can that can increase your ability to monitor your own and regulate your own inflammation. It can also help your body get rid of toxins and allergens to the best of its ability to reduce added stress and inflammation to your body. Also, there are ways to use food outside of just eating more vegetables and eating less junk. There's also ways to use food specifically to reduce your total body inflammation. One of those ways is to utilize food in a way and balance it in a way that controls your blood sugar. So controlling your blood sugar is obviously a way that we can reduce inflammation all over. And in doing that, we can reduce inflammation and triggers to our lungs. And then by the way, if you want to look up the breathing technique that I mentioned, it's called the Buteyko technique. I'm sure I'm butchering that name. It is Buteyko. That is the technique. And then of course you want to avoid things like allergens, toxins, and noxious elements. So reducing your toxin load by what you put on your skin, what you keep around your house, reducing fragrances, perfumes, allergens, making sure that you're addressing water damage, mold, pollen, using air filters. Those are different things that you can also do in order to reduce not only inflammation in your body, but also from triggering asthma attacks, because they can be triggered by allergens. A lot of things can be done that way. And then of course you want to support your ability. We talked about nutrition just a minute ago. So supporting your ability to absorb that nutrition by optimizing your gut health. Your gut health will also maximize your ability to filter out allergens. So when somebody has a lot of allergies, we also know that we may want to look at their liver and see how their liver is functioning, make sure that it's able to optimize its ability to clear allergens and foreign invaders out of the body so that they don't cause an inflammatory response or an allergic reaction. So I hope that this was very helpful. Some of the things, oh, I did want to mention also, is one of the things that mothers can do is breastfeed. This helps reduce allergens. And then